we break into the top 10 pitches of the MLB season. And just to remind our listeners, whether you're listening on audio or on YouTube, these are ranked by run value. And again, to define run value, it's the run impact of an event based on the runners on base, outs, ball, and strike count. A pitcher wants a negative run value because it means that particular offering prevented a certain amount of runs. So on the last list, those didn't prevent runs. They actually added runs. On this list, you'll see it all minus, right? Minus a run value. So for example, the top pitch from 2022 had minus 36 run value. So that means it prevented 36 runs. So these are some of the best pitches of baseball. Remember, we're not looking at, a reliever's cutter who threw 9 innings and the cutter made it on Pitching Ninja and it was the nastiest. These are ranked by total value. So there's a lot of starters on this list, but there are a few relievers, and you can tell if a reliever made this list, that means that pitch is probably the best pitch in baseball. But on this, because it's ranked by total value, they just didn't throw it enough, right? And when I was making this list, there was a couple of pitches that I thought would be up here. Emmanuel Clase's cutter didn't make the list. Andres Munoz's slider is in the just miss category. That's how good his slider was. Spencer Strider's four-seam is on just missed. Alek Manoah's four-seam just missed. Yimi Garcia.
That was a surprise.
Surprise. It just missed. And then, of course, Max Scherzer's slider. Max Scherzer has a lot of really good pitches, but by total value last year, his slider was his best pitch. Ready for number 10?
Yes.
So, in my personal opinion, this is my favorite pitch to watch. It's the most majestic. It just captures every little piece of baseball, I feel like, perfectly. And that's Corbin Burnes' cutter at a negative 21 run value for the Milwaukee Brewers. The cutter for Burnes is such a fascinating story because in 2019, he had the worst qualified ERA in Major League Baseball, 8.82. But he was a top pitching prospect. I think he was a top 100 guy for the Brewers. He had a lot of other really good offerings, but his four-seam fastball was just getting creamed by run value. That year, Corbin Burnes' fastball was the worst pitch in baseball. And then he retools it, gets a cutter instead. His cutter usage went from 0.9% to 31.5% in 2020. What does the ERA go from? 8.82 in 2019 to 2.11 that year. Now he's one of the best overall pitchers in baseball, throwing that cutter at 55.4%. It's dropped a little bit in velocity. That's maybe why it's number 10 on this list. Remember, in 2022 rather than, in a long-standing period, because it's the only pitch in Major League Baseball since 2020 to be ranked in the top 10 in run value every single season. But there's no question about it. It's easily the most valuable cutter in all of baseball.
Yeah, his east-west command is the most impressive part about it, right? With that cutter in the video that you have in the article is, Lars Nootbaar getting backdoored. And what's amazing to me is, he can run that in on a left-handed hitter and tie you up because it's still mid-90s, or he can backdoor you as a lefty. And the other thing is, cutters, sometimes you see guys that, depending on how it moves, how short it is, and how they command it, they might only have success with it against righties or against lefties, but he was great with that cutter against guys from both sides of the plate, right? It's a sub 700 OPS for lefties and for righties. It's more in the low 600s. And, that speaks to, how well he's able to command it east and west. And that's what makes Burnes so good with that cutter. And man, it is one of the more fun pitches to watch, and one of the more fun pitches to watch hitters react to. Just no one ever looks very comfortable against it.
So when I was, I'm creating my top 100 list, right? And I'm on the phone with our guy, Dustin, just talking through some players, trying to get his opinion on some guys. And we were both talking, would you agree or disagree that in terms of a pitch repertoire, right? The cutter, the changeup, the slider, all of his different pitches. Do you think it's the best pitch mix in baseball? Not to say that like DeGrom has his fastball, slider, changeup, which is amazing. Sandy has a great pitch mix. A lot of guys in baseball have a great repertoire. But in my personal opinion, because it's like 5 deep and every single one of them feels like the nastiest thing I've ever seen, I think his array of pitches is the best in baseball. Not to say he has the best command, and like he doesn't throw 102, he doesn't throw a 93-mile-an-hour slider, but in terms of a mix, feels like the best in baseball.
I would take Max Scherzer's mix, I think.
Don't hate that at all.
And a healthy Walker Buehler, potentially.
Don't hate
but
that at all.
I would put Corbin top 3 right there. Top 3 or 4. Maybe I'm missing somebody out. Like, it's better than most guys. You look at chase rates, you look at whiff rates with the curve, the slider, and the changeup. Yeah, it's got to be one of the best, especially just with the command he has. But he does use the cutter probably more than some of the other guys with the, like, more than Max Scherzer uses any of his pitches, or more than Walker Buehler uses any of his pitches. So I would probably lean one of those guys, but Corbin Burnes' pitch mix is up there with anybody's.
One last thing on Corbin Burnes. Sad that Omar Narvaez left, because he was the perfect catcher to frame that backdoor cutter.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it works. It's going to be interesting to see how it works with Contreras now back there, if he's catching a decent amount.
My favorite event in baseball, like a one-pitch event, more than home runs, more than stolen bases, more than walk-offs, anything, is a backdoor 98-mile-an-hour Corbin Burnes cutter that Omar Narvaez catches perfectly for a backwards K. That's my favorite.
I agree. That and Class A's too. I could watch that all day.
I agree. At number 9, the biggest shock on this list, at least it was a shock for me, Joe Ryan's 4-seam fastball at a negative 21 run value. It's only 91 to 95, but it's just so hard to barrel up. Lower batting average against, higher whiff rate, higher put away rate than Verlander's fastball, who it's on this list, higher lower, has a lower hard hit rate than Carlos Rodon's fastball, which is also on this list. And you're wondering, Peter, how is Joe Ryan's fastball on this list? It has some movement, horizontal, vertical. Makes sense that it could potentially be among the better fastballs. But listen to this. Opponents over the last 2 seasons have only hit 173 against the pitch. It's a 4-seamer. And they see it 63% of the time. So if I'm in the box and I know 93 is coming and I still can't hit it, like, you look at his other secondary offerings and they're fine, but you don't just have a 3.5 ERA in Major League Baseball without one elite pitch, or at least command of an elite pitch. Joe Ryan can throw his fastball wherever it wants. It has a lot more vertical movement than you might think, which gives it that rising action, which makes it look faster than 95. And think about it for a second. Why is Joe Ryan good? Because nobody can hit his fastball. Fascinating person to be on this list, I thought.
Yeah, so this is one that I was just digging up the old prospect write-up I did for the Twins in 2021 on Joe Ryan. And I put a plus grade on his fastball. And I remember some people asking me, like, why'd you put a plus grade on it? And I was like, you'll see. And it's crazy to see it translate to this level at the big league level, right? It's that invisible. It's a low release point. His body kind of comes at you quick. And then the arm is the last thing. It's almost slingshotty. And with the ride that it has from that release point, it's kind of like Nestor Cortes, where you're like, come on, that's 92. Like, that's 92 at the top of the zone. Why can't you hit that? But it just rides. And, your mind as a hitter, you're used to seeing balls. And that's the craziest part about hitting and in baseball in general is you see the ball come out of the pitcher's hand. You process that it's a fastball or a curveball. If you process that it's a fastball, your mind accounts naturally for where it's going to drop based on the million balls that all of these guys have hit, except for guys like Joe Ryan, where wherever your mind tells you it's going to drop towards, it doesn't. And that's why all of these guys just swing under it. It's pretty remarkable. And it's cool to see guys that, might not have the best stuff on paper, finding ways to just get swings and misses. And it's pretty awesome that Joe Ryan's fastball is on this list. People say don't trade with the Rays. This was a 40-man roster crunch in a Nelson Cruz deal, and it looks like the Twins got the better end of that one. So sometimes you can trade with the Rays.
Sometimes you can. Dylan Tate's sinker comes in at number 8. Another shocking one on this list because, and I have some history a little bit with Dylan Tate. I grew up in Santa Barbara, California, going to UCSB baseball games all the time. And Dylan Tate was a pitcher on that UCSB Gauchos team for a while I was in high school. And he was an incredible pitcher to watch. I remember I saw Bieber too. I came away watching UCSB games thinking that Dylan Tate guy is the best pitcher I've ever seen in college. He went number 4 overall in the draft, and I was so excited to see him hit the bigs. But he just never got his footing, was never really a starter, but still had great stuff. But he never really developed this sinker until he landed in a bullpen role with the Orioles. And he started throwing his slider a lot more in 2022 to pair with that sinker, which he threw 50% of the time. And there's a lot of great things about the sinker. One, he can throw wherever he wants, which is incredibly important when it has really good movement. And he varies the velocity a ton. I saw this firsthand, Yankees-Orioles games, watching him constantly, because he'll throw a 92, 93 mile an hour sinker and then just hum it up to 99. So not only does it have movement, not only can he throw it wherever he wants, the varying of velocity is fantastic. You're not going to see it on Pitching Ninja, because it's not a Blake Treinen sinker where it's falling off the table, or a Brewstar Gratterall. But in terms of value, in terms of production, it was the most valuable sinker in 2022. And when Saber agrees, they wrote an article on it too, how it was the most valuable sinker. I'll take that. It was on the list. Saber agreed. And watching it firsthand, it's an amazing pitch, because it's not flashy, but it's the varying velocities, the location wherever he wants, and that specific arm angle where it's kind of similar to Joe Ryan, the whippiness of it. Guys couldn't hit it. Couldn't hit it at all last season.
What's amazing is he landed a first strike 76% of the time. You talk about how it's not like a Pitching Ninja pitch. It didn't generate many whiffs. I think it was 10% whiff rate. And I think opponents had like a 92% in zone or 94% in zone contact rate, which is really high, which makes it remarkable. But they also had a 66% ground ball rate. The average exit velocity was super low compared to, a lot of other guys that throw fastballs like that, especially sinkers. And it was one of the best ground ball and weak contact inducers in baseball. Got a lot of chases at the bottom of the zone. And again, like you mentioned, spotted it up. So this was probably the most non-traditional pitch on this list in terms of what you would expect to see such a high run value out of. And it's really cool to see Tate figure it out at this stage of his career, 28 years old, find his way into being one of the game's more effective relievers, which is really awesome, especially for an Orioles team that I know we're all excited about. And I think this guy is part of the reason why they were okay with trading Jorge Lopez, why they were okay with moving some of the other arms in their bullpen. I think this is a guy that's going to be a big part of what they're doing out there in Baltimore. So interested to see how Tate builds off of this year, which was predicated on that sinker.
I'm sure Orioles fans are confused, thinking, where's Felix Bautista? Didn't make the list. Not that 100-mile-an-hour fastball, not the splitter either. The best pitch in the Orioles bullpen last season was Dylan Tate's sinker by the numbers. Nastiness, eye test, yeah, the splitter looks better, but it wasn't as productive as Dylan Tate's sinker. But since 2021, the most productive pitch in Major League Baseball comes in at number 7 in 2022. That's Carlos Rodon, new New York Yankee, his 4-seam fastball.
Yeah.
He throws this frickin' pitch at 61.2%, the highest usage of any on this list. Remember our theme, throw your best pitches more? Yeah, Rodon took his fastball and his slider, and he was like, these are the 2 best pitches. I'm going to use them all the time. Threw it 93% of the time between those 2 in 2022. Since 2021, Rodon has thrown his 96 mile an hour. That's where he averages, but he can get it up to 99. And he's allowed just 20 home runs, and he's thrown it 3,218 times. The crazy part about it is, kind of similar to Joe Ryan, the fastball's coming. Like, what else are you going to sit? He throws it above 60% of the time, and he has one other offering. It doesn't move quite like some other players on this list in terms of vertical movement, but it's hard. Touched 99.5 miles an hour last year with the fastball, and the way it works with the slider, he's a tunneling machine. We use that term a lot. You hear that, and you say, what is tunneling? Tunneling is when they throw it from a similar release point and it looks like it's going in the same direction, but the slider dives down and in, and the fastball just keeps riding up. And you kind of have to guess. But they know either is coming. So if you sit fastball, you're going to see it 2 out of every 3 pitches, and still nobody can touch it. The Yankees are getting one of the best pitchers in baseball.
Yeah. I mean, when he's healthy and the velo is mid 90s, it's ridiculous. It's crazy how confident he is, but also the way he hides the ball, which really, you know, accentuates the ability to tunnel and makes it so hard for hitters to differentiate. And he throws both just enough. The other thing that's really important is his ability to land that slider for a strike. So when you're sitting fastball, like, he's not afraid. If he notices, or his catcher notices that you're sitting fastball, he can spot 2 sliders in a row. And then at that point, your brain's a pretzel. What are you sitting on 0-2 at that point, or 1-2? So that's the perfect part. It's the balance of just enough of each, where he can keep hitters honest, and that get me over curveball every once in a while that he'll mix in just enough to steal some strikes when he needs to. But the amazing thing with Rodon is that, you know, he's gained this velo later in his career. He's kind of gotten healthy and found it. And this is a perfect example of deception and tunneling can really allow stuff to play up in a big way. And it's awesome to see Rodon have this level of success. And I hope it continues in New York. The one thing is, when you do have that riding fastball that you like to put at the top of the zone, you can be more susceptible to the long ball. So I'm interested to see how that's going to play at Yankee Stadium. There's more added importance on hitting your spots, but I think he's going to be great. And I'm really excited to see how he does in pinstripes.
I could see some home runs ticking up, especially coming from San Francisco, where, you know, that San Francisco wind, the thick air. If you've ever seen the Willie Mays documentary, he talks about it. It's not quite to that level, yes, but it's a tough place to hit. One of the easiest parks to pitch in, not to hit in. Yankee Stadium, not so much, but I'm still excited to see him in pinstripes. Number 6, this fastball is thrown about 4 mph slower than Rodon's, but it was a tick more valuable. And now they're both teammates. Nasty Nestor's 4-seam. And if you're curious, of like, oh, he's only throws at 91, 92. I have a GIF in the article where he's hitting 95 miles an hour. Like I said, not one of the hardest fastballs, but it has as much vertical movement as anyone else in the game. That vertical movement gives it that rising effect, but it's not actually rising. Like, when we say rising effect, it's just dropping less than a normal fastball. So it doesn't have that normal plane. So a fastball goes by the batter in a blink of an eye. So it's all muscle memory, right? They're expecting the ball to be on a certain plane and to drop a little bit into their barrel. That doesn't happen with Nestor's fastball. So while it might be 92 to 93, it looks faster than that, and it gets up on you quicker than that. But it's not just the physical pitch, right? It's not just 92. It's not just the vertical movement. It's Nestor's varying leg lifts and his completely different release points that makes it impossible to kind of time up. And that's what Nestor is doing. We saw him talk about that in the All-Star game. Throwing off hitters' timing is incredibly important. And there's few pitchers in baseball who do it better than Nestor Cortes. And that's why opponents only hit 157 against the pitch, only 11 extra base hits. Even though he threw it over 1,000 times, it was his most used pitch. And if you're wondering, how did Nestor have a 2.80 ERA last year? It was on the backs of that frickin' fastball, dude.
And not only does he vary the timing, he varies his release point. You know, sometimes he'll release it even lower. Sometimes he'll release it higher. Sometimes he'll reach back for that 94, 95. Sometimes it's more 90 to 91, 92. And there's just so many things that can disrupt your timing as a hitter from Nestor. And then the fact that it has that natural ride to it. 20 inches of induced vertical break is really, really good. That's elite. You know, you see average in the big leagues around 17.5 inches. Like, he's several inches above what you would expect. So that's going to cause that ball to just float right over barrels. And then you imagine that kind of ride when he releases it a little bit lower sometimes, or a little bit higher. It is just an uncomfortable at bat for anybody. And then he mixes in enough other offerings. You know, the cutter has become a really good pitch for him, and he spots that pitch really well, and even manipulates it to a slider. Like, he's kind of mixing and matching in a way that he's almost an artist out there. And it's really cool to see how he can take what's viewed by many as very average to below average stuff and turn it into something much more than that. And he's easy to root for. If you're newer to the pod, go check out one of our older interviews with him during last season or just ahead of last season during the lockout. He was awesome and one of the easiest dudes to root for in baseball. So hoping for more of the same for Nestor, a guy that does give up some home runs, but seems to just always escape danger and minimize damage. And that part's awesome.
Yeah. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can search up Nestor Cortes interview Just Baseball Fans. It's on there, or you can check out our episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts of the Just Baseball Show. Go check out that interview, one of our favorites. And Aram, we watch a lot of baseball games. We've been to a lot of ballparks. We're only 25 years old, so we haven't seen every pitch in Major League Baseball history. So cut us a little bit of slack for our older listeners. We appreciate you. We love you listening, but we can only say what we've seen over our last 25 years. And coming in at number 5, I think is the nastiest pitch I've ever seen in person. And it was last year. And that's Edwin Diaz's slider. And I can already hear the Mets fans. How is Edwin Diaz's slider only number 5? To be number 5 on this list in terms of total value when you're a reliever goes to show that it probably was the best pitch in baseball, right? Edwin Diaz's slider. It's comical to read some of these stats. He led pitchers who threw at least 50 innings last year in strikeout rate. He only throws 2 pitches, 99.1 miles an hour on the fastball, but he throws his slider 58.3% of the time. This is the definition of throw your best pitches more. Although his fastball is 99, 101, 102, it ticks up there like crazy, he throws the slider more. He threw it 539 times. He allowed 1 home run. That 1 home run, a 363-foot home run by Dalton Varsho, that scraped the right field fence. The slider by Edwin Diaz prevented more runs than any other pitch by a relief pitcher, and I still hang my hat on. Over the years, I've been to about 20-ish stadiums. I've seen a lot of big league guys. I've seen some of the best. I've seen Mariano in person. This slider last year was the nastiest I've ever seen in person. Ever. What about you?
I think there's a bunch of major leaguers who would agree with you. 52.4% K rate on the slider. Like, you don't see that. You don't see a 50+% strikeout rate.
We're muttering over our words kind of because it's just like we're reading the comic books. This is a superhero pitch.
Zone contact of 64%, which is silly. Like, you don't see that there's no hitter in baseball that has, even the worst hitter in baseball, zone contact is not that poor. Chase rates are off the charts. Swinging strike rate is one of the best I've ever seen. Like, every analytical stat is crazy. The pitching ninja gifs that you're going to look at, it's comical. This is in the territory of, I don't know how anybody hits him. I think you're really cheating for one of the 2 pitches, guessing a spot and praying, right? You're just trying to stick the barrel out there. That's what Varsho did with the wall scraper. Like, that's your only shot against Edwin Diaz. And that's why opponents hit 160 against him last year. And that's why I don't see that changing anytime soon with how nasty the slider is and how much better he got with the command of it too. That's the other thing that's really amazing, is that was the big thing that was missing. Most of the time it didn't have a shot. Now he's thrown him for a strike more than he ever did. And now it's a nightmare. Now it's a nightmare because he's spotting them. You're screwed.
I'm glad you mentioned command because that's what takes pitches to the next level. It's one thing seeing a nasty pitch on Pitching Ninja, seeing a nasty pitch when you're sitting down and watching a baseball game, but then there's another thing to command it. Like, if I can throw a 93-mile-an-hour slider, like, there's other pitchers in baseball who do that. While it seems insane to even think that multiple pitchers do that, multiple pitchers can do that. But Edwin Diaz's command, with the way he tunnels off that 99 to 101 mile an hour fastball, makes the slider the 5th most valuable pitch in all of baseball. And it didn't total even close to the amount of innings that anyone else really on this list had. So it's just an amazing pitch. But it wasn't quite as valuable as number 4, Justin Verlander's 4-seam, negative 24 run value. Dude, Justin Verlander is our modern day Roger Clemens. The Rocket and Verlander, tons of similarities, right? 39-year-old Clemens put up a 4.35 ERA in 180 innings, riding a 93-mile-an-hour fastball when he was 39. But it was right in the middle of the steroid era. That's when like Barry Bonds was hitting 150 home runs in a season, and guys were juicing. So like the ERAs, it's like, for example, there was one year where Pedro had that 1.74. Clemens was at 3.7, and he was second in the American League. Like that at the time, a 3.7 ERA was phenomenal.
which is insane.
And Verlander this year, 1.75 ERA in 175 innings while averaging 95 on the heater before his 40th birthday. And the one thing I've always appreciated about Verlander, and I feel like this is almost kind of his calling card now. It might have been the same for Clemens back in the day or Randy Johnson. And that's kind of the level of pitcher that Verlander is and has been over his career. But he can just grab a 99 miles an hour when he wants to, a 98 miles an hour. It used to be he was able to grab 101. Now he doesn't do that anymore. So the peak is really 99. But like he'll sit 94 for 6 innings, and then it's the 7th inning on his 100th pitch, and he'll dial it up to 99. So we always, and it's been that way throughout his career, from when he debuted in his 20s to now when he's in his 40s, he's still going to just have that, I need 99. Let me go get it from my pocket and deliver it at the top of the zone. It's what led to him being a Cy Young. Like, it's not the sexiest pitch, I guess, because it's just a 4-seamer, but it doesn't get more valuable than the guy who had a 1.75 ERA, won the Cy Young, and that was his best pitch, most used pitch.
Yeah, high chase rates, enough whiff, super high strike rate, and threw it a ton. This is a guy that's just a vet, and he just knows when to go to that fastball, where to locate it, and especially with Martin Maldonado last year, it seemed like they just worked in tandem. And every time he went to that fastball, it was in the perfect spot to go to that fastball. And the way he was able to set the tone in at bats with his 4-seamer, and then uses other stuff off of it. This guy's a first ballot Hall of Famer, and it's crazy that he's still padding his resume. He should be unanimous by the time he's done. I'm sure he won't be because of a couple assholes out there, but he should be unanimous. And it's crazy that at age 39, he's going to be 40 in a few weeks. He is still putting up some of the most valuable pitches in baseball, which is just remarkable. And I don't see him slowing down anytime soon.
And it's the heater. It's not like, in his older age, he's developed this slider. I mean, he still has it. I'm not saying he doesn't, but I'm saying still at 39, the 4th best pitch in all of baseball was the 4-seamer. But at number 3, I think from my research, this was the best pitch at inducing weak contact. It didn't have the highest whiff rate. It wasn't his main, like, I got to go 0-2 and this is the ultimate strikeout pitch. But it was impossible to square up. That's Sandy Alcantara's changeup. What a pitch. What a pitch, Aram. He averages 92 on it. Pitchers are lucky. Like, if they have a 92-mile-an-hour fastball, it's a 92-mile-an-hour fastball. That's his off-speed pitch. That's to take you off the speed of his fastball. And Aram, you and I had as many home runs against his changeup as the entire league did last year. He threw it 899 times. No home runs, 1 triple, 10 doubles. Opponents hit 145 against it. But what makes that batting average so impressive is that it was put in play more often than a lot of pitches on this list. They just couldn't hit it, and they couldn't hit it hard. Sandy's job, and we've talked about this, is to log innings, not just rack up the strikeouts, throw as hard as you can, get the count to 3-2, and then strike the guy out. He wants to get you out immediately. So he's going to start you with 100. Then he'll throw the changeup, and you're just going to hit a weak ground ball because you can't do nothing with it. It's the perfect pitch for Sandy's job. He should throw it even more next year. I hope he throws it 40, 50% of the time. It is a disgusting perfect. It's a perfect pitch. Perfect.
It's remarkable. It's something that it almost defies what we're used to in baseball, right? Is like, what do you mean 92-mile-an-hour changeup? It doesn't really make sense. And he manipulates it. Sometimes it's 88, 89, sometimes it's 92, 93. And he spots it really well. And the best thing about it is, you talk about the weak contact, 69% ground ball rate on that changeup. Hence the no home runs.
Better than Dylan Tate's sinker.
Yeah, like that's stupid. It's basically a slower sinker that you can't differentiate because it's similar movement, but he has enough separation there. You know, the sinker averaged 98 miles an hour. So that's the craziest part is his changeup is hard. It's 91, 92 miles an hour, but he still has 6 to 7 miles per hour of separation from his fastball. So it's amazing how he's able to do that. I think something that really helped the changeup this year too was his improvement of the four-seamer, because now you talk about tunneling and you talk about, you know, having a hitter have to worry about every region of the zone. When it was just changeup, sinker, slider, hitters could kind of eliminate that top part of the zone. Now he starts buzzing 98, 99 at the top of the zone and has this changeup that he locates so well in the bottom part, and it just allowed that to play up. So I think that played a big part in it too. And that's why this guy won the Cy Young Award, man. It's amazing. And it's awesome to see because, you know, I love the big strikeout guys. I love the whiff guys, but there's something awesome about a guy, and it's not like he doesn't strike out anybody, 23% K rate, but there's something awesome about a guy that, you know, doesn't have to strike everybody out to be one of the game's most dominant pitchers. I don't know about you, Peter, but it's refreshing for me.
It is refreshing, and I got to be honest with you. So our top 10 pitchers list, I don't want to spoil it, but we're between Jacob deGrom and Sandy for the two best pitchers in baseball. I assume a lot of people are. I may have to change my list. I had deGrom ahead. I might have to put Sandy. I'm not sure yet, but the more I dive into Sandy, the more I'm like, one game, like it might be Sandy, and Sandy, like Sandy's a full season guy, so he's not like, you might not think of him for one game. But if we allowed him to throw 5-6 innings and then lead it off to a great bullpen in a playoff race, he'd have a 1.5 ERA.
So that's a great point, dude. And that's kind of like, you know, that's the case that I would want to really make in terms of putting Sandy above deGrom. I think deGrom might be the most talented pitcher ever, right? But the thing with Sandy is if he wanted to go get those strikeouts, like you said, in 5-6 innings, easily, he could do that. Trust me, he could go snap 94-mile-an-hour sliders and buzz you up 101 and empty the tank. This guy prides himself on being stretched out, not only in individual games, but for the season. And again, that was something that I've talked about on the podcast, but one of the coolest experiences I've had was I went to cover, you know, a game against the Nationals. He was facing Soto and attacked him with the changeups, by the way, and carved him up. But after the game, he threw 115 pitches. I was like, yeah, this is like your fifth game in a row throwing 100 plus pitches. How do you feel? He's like, I wish they'd let me throw more. Like, he wants to throw 150 pitches in a start if it were up to him. He wants to throw 200 innings every year. I want to see one time where they tell Sandy you can only go 5 innings today. I'd love to see what it looks like when he wants to just empty the tank in 5 innings, because I think he could be a high volume strikeout guy too if he wanted to be.
He should be a lot of people's favorite pitcher because he, for the old heads, innings eater.
Yeah.
4-seamer.
Works quick.
Shucks. Works quick. Big old presence on the mound. Reminds you of the Randy Johnsons of the world. But then the new heads, new analytics people, you know, the young people who love watching baseball, love the numbers. Go look at this dude's pitch data.
Yeah.
And tell me he's not elite of the elite. They meet both to create maybe the best pitcher in the entire sport.
Yep.
But the best athlete in Major League Baseball. Maybe the best athlete in the frickin' world. I mean, name me a player that can hit a 460-foot home run, throw a 90-mile-an-hour slider, and run a 4.440. Now, can he actually run a 4.440? Not sure, but he had the 5th fastest home to first time as a runner in all of Major League Baseball. And Shohei Ohtani's slider comes in as the 2nd most valuable pitch from last season. He averages 85.3 miles an hour on the pitch, so it's not quite 90. But the thing is, it's this manipulation of velocity with these pitches. I have video of him throwing 90-mile-an-hour sliders.
Yep.
I have video of him throwing 82-mile-an-hour sliders. It is nasty, but it averages 85.3, and his usage of the pitch has skyrocketed. Throw your best pitches more. We remember Ohtani for the splitter, right? When he came over from Japan, a lot of pitchers coming over from Japan. Kodai Senga, for example, on the Mets. Masahiro Tanaka, when he came over. A lot of these guys, their best pitch is the splitter because that's taught a ton in Japan. And Ohtani is a great splitter, but it's the slider. It's the slider. Threw it 39.1% of the time compared to 22% the year before. Now he's had 2 straight seasons where opponents hit under 200 against the slider. You keep finding things about Ohtani where he's the best at, like in high leverage situations, offensively, one of the best. High leverage pitching, one of the best. Sliders, second best pitch in baseball. He's one of the fastest hitters in baseball. He's one of a couple players who can hit the ball 120 miles an hour. He's one of a couple players who can hit 101 on the mound. Everything he's at the top of. Yeah. Like, we don't even get what we're seeing. It's like impossible to comprehend because we have no. And the comments, I make so many Ohtani videos on TikTok, and it's always like, what, you going to keep meat riding him? Yeah, I'm going to keep meat riding him. I'm going to ride his meat to the moon. I'm going to keep riding it because it's insane, and you need to put it through your freaking head that we're seeing the greatest thing we've ever seen in sports. Yeah, I'm going to continue to say that. Like Bullet Rogan in the Negro leagues, when we talked to Joe Posnanski, was like the only comparison because Babe Ruth in like 1918, he did it once, and like it wasn't even as good as Ohtani's doing now. Like Bullet Rogan is the only person that we have to possibly compare, and nobody did it over this amount of seasons at this rate as Ohtani against the best athletes in the world in Major League Baseball. And he's the fastest, Aram.
The fastest part is, I think, the part that
he's the fastest.
I think that's the one that puts you over the top, I swear.
The fastest.
I think you mentioned that. I think you mentioned that more than anything. Yeah. Like, you're like, and he's the fastest. It is incredible. And the slider really was a game changer for him on the mound, because that was kind of the question, right? We knew he was incredible. We knew that he's, one of the best power bats in the game and a really good starter. We always knew that he was going to be a really good starter, but I don't know like how sure we were that he could be a top 10 pitcher in the game. And he's right on the fringe of that because of what he's done with this slider. We always knew how talented he was, but it didn't quite come together until he found this slider. Now the splitter is a great side piece to the fastball and the slider. I think a splitter is a really hard pitch to have as a number 1 out pitch as a starter, because it's so hard to locate. There's some days where it's just not there. You watch Tanaka, man. When Tanaka had the splitter, he might throw you could throw a no-hitter almost. You take a no-hitter into the 6th, but when he didn't have the splitter, you might as well just chalk the game up. It's over. That can't be your number 1 out pitch. It's too hard. And now Ohtani has it for the second time through the lineup. And it's also there's belief that it can mess your arm up too. I don't know, sliders too. I think everything messes your arm up, but I think it also just takes some pressure off. But that's the big thing, is splitters are either there or they're not. I thought Tanaka was the best example of that, because not many guys had it better than Tanaka. And there was days where I was like, oh, he doesn't have that, man, this game's over. Like, and I know you can relate to that.
Oh, I can certainly relate to that. It would be like if you start leaving it over the plate, it's like a bad changeup that just gets hit to the freaking moon. But now Ohtani has this slider, but it ain't number 1. And number 1, since 2019, since Baseball Savant started tracking run value, the 2 most valuable pitches in all of baseball, 2019 Garrett Cole's fastball when he was dipping his fingers into some of the stickier substances. Allegedly. Allegedly. And then in 2022, Dylan Cease, his slider was the number 1 most valuable pitch at minus 36 run value. Cease threw his slider about 30% of the time in 2021, and opponents hit 176 against it. So he looked at that pitch and thought to himself, yeah, I'm going to throw that more. He upped it to 42.9%. And even though he's throwing it more than his fastball, hitters had 0 chance. They hit 128 against it with a 22.3% hard hit rate. Edwin Diaz, his slider, opponents hit 114 against it, and that's in a 1-inning spurt normally. That's how good this slider is from Dylan Cease last year. Opponents hit 128 with a 22.3% hard hit rate. To show you what that means, Nick Madrigal, who we know is like this contact guy where we make the jokes where if he slashed 280, 280, 280, it'd be a great season for Madrigal because he has 0 power. He had a 24.6% hard hit rate last year. So Cease's slider turned the average batted ball into a Nick Madrigal ground out. Opponents swung and missed at this pitch at a 42.9% rate, similar to the way hitters swing and miss at Devin Williams' changeup, the airbender. He threw his slider 1,338 times and allowed 12 extra base hits. No wonder he's now a finalist for the Cy Young he was last year, and he'll probably be for the next 5 years, as long as he still keeps freaking throwing that slider. I test matches because it's so nasty, and he throws it more than his fastball. throw your best pitches more. It might not be the regular way of going things where you have the four seam, you throw it a bunch, and then you have your secondaries. If your secondary is that good of a pitch, throw it more because guys can't touch it. Dylan Cease's slider, best pitch in baseball, best off-speed pitch in baseball since they started tracking run value. No wonder he finished second in Cy Young voting.
So before I forget, awesome interview with Dylan Cease. I know we plugged it a couple times, but specifically as it goes to the pitch usage thing, it's really interesting. So he was on Show and Go with our guy, Jack McMullen and Taylor Davis. And they had an awesome conversation about from disc golf to pitch usage. But the one thing that Dylan Cease talked about is wanting to work on the changeup. And I'm thinking like, man, if his changeup's even okay, because he threw like 70 times last year. If his changeup is okay, if he can develop it to a decent pitch, oh my gosh. Like on top of the slider, which we know is the best pitch in baseball this past year, the fastball, which is just high velo.
Up to 99.
Yeah. And a curveball that's a fine third pitch. Like if he has a changeup that maybe is better than the curveball, this guy's winning the Cy Young Award. On the point of the slider, just something kind of funny, because this is the best pitch in baseball. I wanted to see who hit home runs on the best pitch in baseball. And if this doesn't epitomize how random baseball is, I don't know what will. I think it was 7 home runs on the pitch, right? Altuve was one of them, but wait till you hear the rest of these names, Peter. Besides Altuve, Ryan Mountcastle, Javi Baez, who I think he closed his eyes and swung. You have Stone Garrett, the GOAT, who was a free agent that just signed with the Nationals. Jonathan Arauz, who I don't even know where he is now. I think he was with the Red Sox at one point last year. The GOAT, Vinny Pasquantino. That's not a surprise. And then Jake Cronenworth wall scraped one. That like just to have that like dichotomy, like just the group of random dudes,
legends,
and then a couple studs, and then the GOAT Vinny Pasquantino. I just had to highlight that group. But this pitch is the best in baseball by the eye test, by the data, and Dylan Cease is disgusting. And the fact that he's locating this pitch for a strike now 65% of the time, given his command issues in the past, this guy's gonna win a Cy Young, right, Peter?
I think so. I think he could be, if he improves on his command and that changeup looks good next year, he could be the best pitcher in baseball. That's how good he is. Because he had terrible command last year and still was like a 2.2 ERA guy. Like imagine if he starts commanding these pitches. Because from a stuff profile, it doesn't really get better than Dylan Cease. That'll do it for this episode of the Just Baseball Show. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that like, hit that subscribe button, and let us know in the comments what your favorite pitches were from 2022. Tons more content coming. You can also read about these pitches on justbaseball.com. I wrote up 2 different articles, one highlighting the worst pitches in baseball, then another one highlighting the best pitches in baseball. You can find those all on justbaseball.com. Prospect hunters, go check out the Call Up podcast that Aram hosts. Jack hops on from time to time. Of course, go check out that Show and Go interview with Dylan Cease and just keep following up on that podcast. They just released a new really fun episode about the life of a minor leaguer and all the different questions. Like Jack had some great ones. He's a broadcaster in the minor leagues, knows the struggle of these guys. Taylor Davis broke it down. Awesome stuff. Go check out that podcast. Super Bowl picks. I have them on Not Gambling Advice. Make sure to download Prize Picks, because we're going to be doing a season-long entry, and you want to get your free coin, use code JustBaseball. The link is in the episode description of this podcast.
Helps us as well.
You get a full $100 bonus. So if you put in 100, you get 100. If you put in 50, you get 50. Whatever you deposit, they will match on Prize Picks. Might as well use some free money to play the season-long entry, and it's going to be a ton of fun tracking all of that. Stay tuned for a ton more content on justbaseball.com, as well as all the stuff that I went over. Fantasy, college, top 10s, World Baseball Classic. I keep getting DMs. Where are your World Baseball Classic picks?
We're coming.
Can we wait until the rosters are announced, please? Can we wait? I know everyone's getting all over it. I love it. You know I'm going to be over it. I was asked, are you going to do it? Of course I'm going to do it. What is the question? What, of course.
I know. You were already asking me, like, can I start? And I'm like, dude, just like, we got to wait, man. Like, we don't even know the rosters.
Who's on the team. I need to see who's on the team. So that'll again do it for this Just Baseball Show. And with that, thank you, everybody.